Morning, and it's a glorious morning in the UK. Yes, we have sunshine. In fact, we've had sunshine all week this week, which is unusual for the UK because we don't tend to get sunshine all week. But we've had sunshine all week this week, so it's been glorious. And after work, I've had a few drinks with people in the beer gardens. It has been a really, really lovely week. And here we are Sunday morning, and I'm sitting here rather than being out there talking to you guys. I sacrificed myself for the love of this channel. That's a load of bollocks, really. I'm being brutally honest. I've been up about an hour. I had a really late night last night, and I haven't quite got out the door yet. But that's where we are. Anyway, here's a problem. Okay, last week I sat on the rant and said that the M1, while I was away on holiday, the M1 turned 30. So, you know, it's 30 years old. I also mentioned the T1, and if you watch my channel regularly, you know that I own a T1. I love my T1, although it's temporarily replaced by my Oasis at the moment in the front room. T1's gone into a box and it's gone down to the storage unit. Temporarily, I might add, it will be coming back because I do actually like it as a piece of furniture while I work out what to do with the Oasis. Anyway, so the T1 is also a bit of an old gentleman now. It is 25 years old. So the T1 came out about 4 or 5 years after the M1. And it was seen as a successor, although actually the M1, as I said last week, actually was in production longer than the T series was. But anyway, the issue is that the T series moved forward in terms of technology and deployed a hard disk drive into the unit for reading and writing data. So no longer were you a slave to the memory cartridge, which back in those days was a very expensive piece of kit. I mean, I can remember buying, for my first keyboard, which was the DXR, buying a memory cartridge for my DSR, and I seem to remember paying something like £50 UK for the cartridge, which was something like 48k at the time, massive amount of storage. But I also seem to remember the cartridges for like the DX7 were something like 160, 150, let's say 150 UK pounds, that sort of touch. They were incredibly expensive. So if you were a giggy musician, you had two options. You either bought a cartridge, and the cartridge was if you were standing on stage, the cartridge was the fastest way to get your programs back, or you did a SysX dump to a computer. And bearing in mind the computers back in those days weren't particularly fast, so a SysX dump was quite a lengthy process. So again, if you were a giggy musician or you were a working musician and you were using this technology, you really wanted a memory card or a series of memory cards, cartridges, whatever the system that your keyboard setup worked. Anyway, along came the T1, and the T1 gave you floppy disk drives. Okay, and the T1, so you could go down the computer store, you could buy a box of these, and you could start merrily saving off your compositions, your sequences, your sound files that you've modified onto one of these. Now, disk drives come in different flavours. No, that's not quite true. The way a disk drive is formatted, as in the way the computer sets it up to work, or the keyboard sets it up to work, come in many different flavours. Now, the most common of those flavours is what we call the MS-DOS format, or is nicknamed as the MS-DOS format. It really isn't, it's just something that Microsoft used for their operating system. But it's actually known as the FAT format, which stands for File Allocation Table. So the disk is formatted in such a way that anything that can read File Allocation Table can read the disk. And as I say, Microsoft used that as its base system, as did many other manufacturers of the time. Hence the reason why most disks are colloquially known as formatted to MS-DOS. I say is technically not correct. Now, Korg, being Korg, developed their own format. Okay, and they developed the Korg format, and I don't know what it's specifically known as, but there was a format, and it worked on a specific way to format one of these. So the disc inside here is a standard 1.44 double density floppy drive. Okay, that was the standard disc around at the time. This is one of those. Okay, that's what it is, but it's formatted in a weird format. And the problem you have with that is that the Korg T1 will read that till the cows come home, but a computer will not. That is where the problem comes. These things, like the keyboard, are now 25 years old. These things have a finite amount of life in them. Okay? At the end of the day, all this thing really is a plastic hard case with a piece of plastic inside there that's coated with a magnetic material, and when you stick that into your CD, into your floppy drive, it changes that magnetic material to read ones and zeros. Okay, that's all it does in here. And that's all this is. And that magnetic material will run out after being changed state from plus to minus many, many times. Okay, things wear out, it's a fact of life. So what I tend to do whenever I buy or especially acquire originals like this, is I take what we call an ISO. And again, another computing term. What is an ISO? An ISO is an image. An ISO is an exact image of the media that you are copying. Okay, it basically means that if you take an ISO of this disk, if I then write that ISO to another disk, I will have an exact duplicate of this disk on the copy. Why do I do that? Well, number one, to protect the information on here, because these things are becoming rare. Number two, what I tend to do is I tend to create an ISO and then copy it out to another disk, and then I will use the other disk for my day-to-day working, and these get put in a disk storage unit and then put into storage. So if the original goes wrong at some point, I've got an ISO. If I lose the ISO, I've still got the original. Okay, that's what I tend to do. As I said, Korg have the Korg format, which can't be written by a computer, because I have tried and I can't do it. So I've been doing some research, and I haven't been doing the research alone. You probably heard me refer to Bruce, and Bruce has been doing the research with me, and we've come to the conclusion that a USB hard drive, or sorry, a USB floppy drive should I say, cannot be used for reading these disks. It has to be an internal floppy drive. And the technical reason why it has to be an internal floppy drive is because apparently your computer addresses the USB floppy drive differently, because it has to go through the USB bus, than it does to a floppy drive that is attached to the motherboard, which is the old style of standing these things up. Now here's another. The problem just carries on. I'll tell you what I think the solution is. How many computers can you buy with a floppy drive actually inside the computer? Well, I can tell you the last computer I had with a floppy drive inside the computer was a works laptop, and that must have been 10 years ago, at least 10 years ago. I haven't had a floppy drive in a computer for many, many years. In fact, my Apple Mac doesn't actually have a CD drive attached to it now. You actually have to buy one of those USB. Yeah, well, that's an Apple thing, isn't it? Everything you buy for an Apple is an optional extra. Anyway, you have to go and buy it as a USB drive, because we don't have an internal floppy. Even the last two Windows laptops I've had have only had CD drives. So I bought a USB floppy drive when I was trying to find out how to deal with this, and failed spectacularly. fact I can't find the USB floppy drive after I've had a clear up between here and the studio is a bit worrying, but I know it's not in the house, and I went down the studio the other night and I had a damn good hunt around down there and I couldn't find it there either. I'm not quite sure what I've done with it. Oh well. Anyway, the floppy drive has to be internal. Okay. The second issue is that the programs that were developed for working with Korg and Roland equipment of that time that had specific file formats put it this way, won't work on Windows 7, seems to have sporadic issues with Windows 7, so we're really looking at Windows XP as the de facto platform. And I haven't got a Windows XP machine either. I haven't had a Windows XP machine for probably about 10 years either. So I'm sort of scuppered on both fronts, or I was. So the solution to the problem was to put my money where my mouth was. If I was going to take this research any further forward, I'd have to go and do something. This is what I've done. This is a reconditioned Dell Optiplex. Okay, needs a damn good clean, I might add. I think somebody's giving it a once over, but it's still a bit. So I'm going to give it another good clean. Let's see what happens. But this has, most importantly, of course, the internal floppy drive on it. So I am going to see if I can get this working to read these discs to create the ISO images that I can then store off to long-term storage. So that is the floppy drive problem, or the floppy disk problem, that I probably will refer to over the coming weeks. The second thing that's come up recently on the channel, and you saw me take this off the top of here when I first started talking, is about the DX7. Now, my DX7 sits on the top of one of the racks in the studio, and I play it a hell of a lot, but my DX7 suffers, like a lot of DX7s now, the LCD display is starting to fade. And there is no way on the DX7 to actually play with the contrast, really. So you can't pop the pot up and see if you can get a bit more from that. The actual display itself is starting to foam, which is not surprising given the fact that if this is 25, if the T1 is 25 years old, the M1 is 30 years old, the DX7 or the Mark II is probably about 30 years old as well. The Mark 1, any early Mark 1s would now be 35 years old, but my one is a mid production Mark II, so it's probably about 30 years old. So anyway, when you go on eBay or Reverb, there's loads of people that seem to be out there selling a new LCD display for the DX7 or the TX7. And actually, funny enough, the displays are interchangeable between the two products. But there's loads of people selling displays for those models, but you see no one selling displays for a DX7 Mark II. And there is a really interesting story, and part of the interesting story is that a DX7 Mark II is actually a pain in the rear end to actually get to pieces to change the display. So let me show you. I'm going to stand up and come to the camera so you can see this. Right. So if I point this at the camera like so, there is a plate which is actually the plate that's displayed to the user. So the user sits and looks there, right, and there's this plate here. And what Yamaha in their infinite wisdom did, I don't know whether that comes out really well on camera, but if you look down there, you can see that this piece of perspex that sits on top is actually bonded to the display. Okay. Now this was one I bought second hand because I knew mine was failing and I wanted a backup. I wanted to just put it into the store and leave it there for when I needed it, because I know eventually the one I've got will fail and I won't be able to see anything on the screen anymore. So this was the idea of this, was to be my backup. Now I'm thinking probably the idea of this is actually to be my experimental test bed, because I have found a guy who is willing to, he thinks he has the specification for the screen, which is the component that sits underneath, but what he doesn't have is anyone who's willing to be the guinea pig to see if it will work. Now I have all the circuitry for the screen here, so if I'm going to blow something up, I'm going to blow the spare circuitry up, not my live circuitry. So I think I'm going to sort of say, well, I'm prepared to be the guinea pig to see if we can get that displayed. The other thing about this that I realise is, in order to get this off, I'm probably going to have to use something like, I think probably the best way to do this will be a decorator's scraper, you know, with a long edge, but it's got quite a lot of purchase on it, because I think, looking at how this is put together, you're going to need to take something long and thin under there and just slowly work it along to see if to break that bond. What I have seen in the user groups, when I've seen people, and I've not seen very many talk about this to be honest, but I've seen people talk about this, is that this is quite brittle, and if you put too much leverage on it, you're liable to crack this perspex screen. And the perspex screen is as difficult to get hold of as the display is, obviously, because the two are bonded together. So we will see what happens with that. Now I expect to do that over the coming months, probably not until the end of summer though. And looking, just having a sort of a bit of shifty at this. Yeah, I haven't really thought about it too much, but that's what I'm going to do. So any of you who are asking me questions about the DX7 screen, it is a complete unit. There is no way on this unit to actually adjust anything. There's no adjustable components as far as I can see, although I am no electronics expert, and I suppose somebody who would have the schematics for the DX7 itself could probably work out between which pins you put things to put some sort of adjustment pot in, if you were going to go down that route. But there we are. Yeah, DX7 Mk2 screen. So, not a rant, but more of an informative discussion today. And this is one of those things where I turn around and say, you know, if you have got anything you want to ask, you know, bang it in as a comment against the videos, and I will respond. I'm not being as responsive as I'd like to be. I've got things going on, as you probably know from videos I've done. But I have been watching the mailbag build up over the last few weeks, so I am going to do a mailbag session probably this week, just to sort of tear some of that down and give you my views on it, and possibly point you in the right direction going forward. But other than that, it is a lovely sunny day, and I shouldn't really be here talking to you, but I do have another couple of videos to do because I have things to do this week. So I'm going to sign off and say, keep it calm and get kinky. See you next week. Bye bye. So this is the point in the video where I turn around to you and say, if you enjoyed the contents of this video, please give it a thumbs up. It allows other people to find this content more easily that you have enjoyed. I'm sure by now, if you didn't like the content of the video, you've probably given me a thumbs down, but I'd prefer if you didn't. If you'd like to be notified about when I post additional content to this channel, somewhere about here should be the subscription icon. So please click on there and subscribe to the channel. Over here should be other content that you may enjoy that I've already done or posted to the channel. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you again.